hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed not by acts of parliament, not by acts of kings and queens and princes of earth, not by the Emancipation Proclamation, not by the Civil Rights Act, but by God with certain unalienable rights. And among them are the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is these common values and ideals that unite us today. It was these ideals that broke 168 years of Marine Corps segregation on August 26, 1942. It was these ideals that brought 20,000 African-American men through the gates of Montford Point Camp. They came from all walks of life. They came to prove that patriotism is indeed colorless.
The Montford Point Marines were a project. They were allowed into the Marine Corps to prove that they could not be Marines.
My brother George, we came home after boot camp and told me all about it. I said, well, I'm going to follow in his footsteps, so that's what I did. I forged my mother's signature and signed up right out of high school. 17 and a half.
They were the best and the brightest and the toughest. And I said, that's me.
For a long time, the guys who served tried to tell everybody our story, but nobody was listening.
I'm trying to blank all that stuff out because it wasn't pretty.
The Marine Corps didn't want you to know. It's just that simple.
But this is not just Marine Corps history or black history, it's American history, and the world needs to know about the Montford Point Marines.
(1940), a new decade in America and a new life for its economy. World War II was raging overseas, and the U.S. military was preparing to join the fight. That meant millions of defense jobs for workers, only not for Black Americans. Racism took them out of the manufacturing boom needed to support the military's entry into the global war. Black men were able to register for the draft, but most were only allowed to serve in support roles, and they were all segregated into Black regiments in the Army and the Navy. The men were not allowed into the Marine Corps.
Now you got to talk about the leadership of the Marine Corps at the time. Specifically, you got to talk about Thomas Holcomb. He was asked publicly if it was a choice of 250,000 blacks or 5,000 whites. His response was, I'd rather take the whites. He said the Marine Corps, these African American, he called us Negroes then, are trying to break into a club that does not want them.
The painful paradox of Black Americans toiling for a country that treated them like second-class citizens moved civil rights leaders to action. In 1941, A. Philip Randolph, who had famously organized the first Black labor union, went to President Franklin D. Roosevelt's Oval Office with a threat: end segregation in defense industries, or there would be a march on Washington.
At the time, President Roosevelt was running for re-election. A. Philip Randolph was leading the push for fair employment for blacks as the World War II was going on. And to appease them, they said, okay, let's send them in, train them, and once they realize that they can't be Marines, they will go away.
That led the president to sign Executive Order 8802, banning discrimination in defense-related jobs. And with that, the Marine Corps was forced to open its doors to Black men. It did so reluctantly.